This presentation, I would like to focus my attention on Sicilian wines and spirits as multi-layered expressions of the island's entrepreneurial and cultural milieu. I will consider the case of 5 innovators who created with their wines, spirits, and liqueurs not just successful products, but also living embodiments of Sicily's complex Mediterranean identity. I will examine here the stories of Vincenzo Florio Sr, founder of Marsala Florio in 1832, Salvatore Averna, creator of the Amaro Averna in 1868, Antonio Starabba di Rudinì, Prime Minister of Italy and pioneering investor in Val di Noto in the late 19th century, Giacomo Rallo, founder of Donnafugata in 1983, and Edoardo Strano, creator of the orange liqueur Amara in 2014. These profiles aim to illuminate Sicilian winemaking as a sophisticated synthesis of inputs: British trade, Marsala, religious tradition, Averna, Greek heritage and modern industry, the Val di Noto, indigenous varietals and art, Donnafugata, and sustainable agriculture, Amara. I want to start with Marsala, the most atypical of Sicilian wines. Its fortune is in fact rooted in the initiative of 2 British entrepreneurs, John Woodhouse and Benjamin Ingham. The Liverpool native Woodhouse first arrived in Sicily in 1770 after working in Jerez, Spain, where he had mastered the technique to produce the fortified wine Madeira. 3 years after his arrival, he brought the first cargo of Sicilian wine to England, and not by chance, he commercialized it as a generic Madeira. At the time, it was common to not indicate territorial denominations, as wines were often forged, sold under a different name, or blended to give body to more valuable wines. In its early days, the Marsala fortified wine was known in England as Bronte Madeira, and in the United States as Sicily Madeira. Its link to Madeira is also confirmed in 1800, when Admiral Nelson chose to provision the British Navy stationing in the Mediterranean with Woodhouse Marsala as a replacement for missing Porto and Madeira. The Leeds native Benjamin Ingham was the true inventor of Marsala wine, as he was the first to introduce in Sicily the Spanish aging process known as soleras, based on the continuous refilling of barrels placed on the soil, solera, and guaranteeing more stability to the wine. After acquiring a land near the Woodhouse vineyards in 1812, he started to sell Marsala as its own label in the British market and spearheaded an agricultural revolution in the Trapani area, an area where other British businessmen invested and which by the 1840s the local economist Francesco Ferrara would define as a country within a country, a piece of Great Britain in Sicily. The first local entrepreneur to open a factory in Marsala was Vincenzo Florio Sr. When he started it in 1832, he also eyed the export market, as confirmed by the words of his mission to open a fabbrica destinata alla manifattura di vini all'uso di Madeira, factory for the manufacture of Madeira wines. Marsala Florio was part of a larger banking business, which also involved navigation, sulfur extraction, and tuna fishing. As they established the Oretea foundry in 1840, the Florios strengthened their fleet and navigation business, which initially served British men traveling to Sicily and would later provide transportation for Sicilian emigrants traveling across the ocean. The sulfur business was also a key export asset for the Florios, as British industrialists discovered the ore's applications in industry as a reagent for creating sulfuric acid and soda, in the military, in the production of explosives, and in agriculture as a bacterial killer for reducing mildew on vines and plants. In 1874, the Florios expanded their commercial dominion west of Marsala with the purchase of the Egadian islands of Favignana and Formica, where they developed the tonnare and a new technique for conserving tuna with oil in cans, consolidating their position in the international market. Against this backdrop, while seeing Marsala wine as part of a larger international trade, The Florios also began to commercialize it in Italy, branding it as GD, Garibaldi Dolce, to distinguish the product from the SOM, Superior Old Marsala, which Ingham and Woodhouse sold in Great Britain. The first Italian recognition for Marsala Florio came in 1861 at the National Exposition of Florence, right after unification, an event which first showcased goods from the peninsula and first brought together products which before unification were solely destined to either regional markets or foreign export. On that occasion, when also the wines from Noto made their first appearance on the national market, the Marsala fortified wine was recognized as a model of Sicilian winemaking. Over the following years, Marsala Florio became a symbol of excellence in the domestic market, and its lion emblem came to embody the growing power and appeal of the family. Vincenzo's son, Ignazio, and his wife, Donna Franca, would fully manifest this new influence at the turn of the century by bringing European royals and celebrities to their Villino Florio in Palermo, by organizing in Palermo the National Exposition of 1891, which launched its Liberty season, and by starting the automobile race Targa Florio in 1906. Now, with the Florios, we see how the Marsala winemaking tradition intersects global trade. With the case of Salvatore Averna, and we move here to the center of the island, we see how a liqueur, or rather an Amaro bitter, subsumed and reinvented the island's religious tradition. Don Salvatore, a judge in his native town of Caltanissetta, was a well-respected member of the local community and a benefactor of a nearby abbey. In 1859, the last year of the Kingdom of Sicily, the prior of the abbey entrusted him with the recipe of the convent's herb elixir, which had been passed on from generation to generation, as a token of gratitude for his generosity. Averna first began making the Amaro for his guests at home, combining herbs, roots, and natural spices with aromas and fragrances of Sicilian citrus. And then, 9 years later, he began to produce it for a broader audience. 1868 marks the beginning not only of his entrepreneurial journey, but also of the transition from an inherited tradition to a new product, Amaro Averna, which would give a Sicilian twist to an emerging category in the national market. Campari was created in 1860 and Fernet Branca in 1862. We don't know much else about Don Salvatore, except for the aura that his name still bears in the premium bottles of his brand. What we know is that his son Francesco built a structure for the company, moving the Amaro from an exclusively Sicilian context to a national and international market. His first recognition came in 1895, when King Umberto I visited the company and awarded the liqueur with a gold pin from the Savoia royal house. 17 years later, in 1912, King Victor Emmanuel III granted Averna the right to add the patent of the royal house to its label. You can still see it today, and even though the brand is now owned by Campari, the depth and genuineness of Amaro Averna still lies upon the aura of its story and local taste, what a famous ad simply called the full taste of life, il gusto pieno della vita. The same transition from local to international market in the second half of the 19th century is a key factor in understanding the rebirth of Nero d'Avola, and we move here to the southeastern edge of the island. An important reason for this shift can be found in the contemporary spread of the phylloxera in France, a vine-killing parasite imported to Europe from American vines and discovered by French biologist Jules-Émile Planchon in 1860. As the parasite severely curtailed French wine production over the following decades, a new demand for filling or blending grapes led to a sudden increase of production in Sicily, as confirmed by the triplication of lands cultivated to wine in the island between 1860 and 1880. Over these years, Sicilian winemaking shifted from a preeminently local to an export market, as local production was used to fill in and blend with French or northern Italian wines. The growth of the Sicilian wine production slowed down in 1878, when the passing of Italy's first protectionist law led to a custom war with France. and a colonial friction over Tunisia, which eventually became a French protectorate. This political tension was also a stimulus to reconfigure the old local grape from Avola from a blend wine, as it was seen since the Exposition of Florence, into a self-standing product. The early seeds of this change lie in the vision of Marchese di Rudinì. Before talking about his estate of Pachino, a premise on the so-called Noto Valley is needed. The defining event for the territory was the earthquake that shook it on January 11, 1693, a tragedy which led to the reconstruction of the area, the formation of its peculiar Baroque style, and the rediscovery of local viticulture. Wine had been part of the cultural heritage since ancient times, but had lost strength in the Middle Ages. The Greeks, who used wine in Dionysian feasts and symposia, had brought two varietals to Syracuse from their motherland, the Polio, which is now the Moscato di Siracusa, and the black grape, which adapted well in the new milieu, de facto becoming a local plant, what we now know as Nero d'Avola. While Romans consolidated Sicilian viticulture, Arabs later curbed it due to the religious prohibition against alcoholic beverages. Arabs, nonetheless, left a profound imprint in the southeast, founding the city of Marzamemi, implanting orange trees and reclaiming the countryside of Pachino, a key site for the later success of local viticulture. After centuries of agricultural stall and commercial isolation, the post-earthquake reconstruction led to a reappreciation of viticulture, and over the 18th and 19th centuries, the Nero d'Avola varietal regained strength for either local consumption or, during the phylloxera crisis, for blending. In this context, Antonio Starabba, known as Marquis of Rudinì, had a major impact in revitalizing the area at the turn of the 20th century, as well as in laying the foundations of its later commercial success. Marquis of Rudinì served as Italy's prime minister twice, at times of great turmoil. During the crisis of 1891, which led to the one and only rupture of diplomatic ties between Italy and the United States after the lynching of New Orleans, and during the crisis of 1898, which followed the Spanish-American War and led to the military repression of Milan's riots against the rising prices of wheat. In our context, a lesser-known aspect of the Marquis is his work as wine innovator. The Rudinì's vision is at the base of the Val di Noto wine business, as his investments in his own estate of Pachino, his financial support for the first refrigerated vinification plant near Marzamemi, and his construction of a direct way to transfer wines from the wineries to ships directed to Genoa and Livorno, not only improved the quality of Nero d'Avola, but also legitimized it as an independent product. The mass production of pure or self-standing Nero d'Avola would take off only decades later, in the 1960s, when the area between Siracusa, Avola, Noto, and Pachino, the lands hit by the earthquake of 1693, became a protected terroir, and when its vines were recognized with a unique aromatic palette. The Rudinì, however, was the first to see the potential of the ancient grape and set in motion the process to turn a local product from a filler in wine blends into the expression of a particular terroir. The Rosso Pachino from his own estate still pays tribute to his initiating role, and the Strada del Vino, a tourist way connecting 22 wineries in the Val di Noto, is the visible manifestation of the path that he envisioned for Sicilian winemaking, from local production to international export, from export to rediscovery, from marginality to self-standing excellence. In my concluding observations, I would like to explore two contemporary figures who transfigured this legacy in a modern key, refashioning Sicilian winemaking into an authentic yet innovative expression of such a diverse, layered, and complex heritage. The first innovator I want to consider is Giacomo Rallo. Born in Marsala from a local family of winemakers, he was the first to realize the gradual loss of appeal of Marsala fortified wine in the 1970s. In 1983, as he founded the Donnafugata winery with his wife Gabriella, he was the first to heavily invest in table wines. His new approach aimed at changing the perception of Sicilian winemaking and creating a new appeal around them. On the one hand, he moved to indigenous varietals, valuing territorial specificity and creating quality tailor-made products from sustainable practices and unique vineyards. He was the one who launched the Passito di Pantelleria. On the other hand, he appropriated and redesigned his own Sicilian cultural heritage, branding his wine Donnafugata in honor of the novel Il Gattopardo, The Leopard by Tomasi di Lampedusa, dialoguing with art as illustrator Stefano Vitale gave his label designs a unique artistic form, and partnering with fashion, as we can see in his collaboration with Sicilian brand Dolce & Gabbana. The second innovator I want to consider here is Edoardo Strano, who relaunched the Sicilian tradition of Amaro and reinvented it in a fresh new way. In 2014, he established with Giuseppe Librizzi the company Amara in the Contrada San Martino between Catania and Messina, studying the production of an increasingly more popular red-orange liqueur. His story starts from the gift of a citrus grove from his grandfather and his decision after graduating from college to spend more time in the countryside. His care for local sourcing, his desire to restore an inherited agricultural patrimony, and his understanding of the Amaro tradition allowed him to appropriate and renew a Sicilian excellence. In one way, his recipe, combining selected peels of Arancia Rossa di Sicilia IGP with wild herbs and the water of the springs of Etna, emphasizes territoriality and sustainability. In another way, his bottle designs the quintessence of Sicily by visualizing the cold and incandescent form of lava in the alternance of black glass and bright red label, by evoking contact with the real land, the figure of a bird near an orange tree, and by covering the product in thin wrapping paper in homage to old customs. Now, in our contemporary world, Sicily is now recognized as a primary land of Italian winemaking, and its varietals are regularly featured in global wine reviews. What you find in a glass of Sicilian wine or spirit, however, is not just a distinctive or exclusive set of flavors, which certainly derive from the island's rich and complex soil, but also, as I outlined, a layered and polyvalent story. Foreign influence, Marsala, religious heritage, Averna, rediscovered past, Nero d'Avola, aesthetic reinvention, Donnafugata, and environmental sustainability, Amara. What a Sicilian glass reflects is ultimately the Mediterranean soul of the island as a sophisticated and stratified crossroads of arts, trade, and legacy. Thank you very much for watching. And if you like this presentation, I invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel or to follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Grazie ancora, arrivederci e alla prossima.